So I watched the brand new movie, Shelby Oaks, directed by Chris Stuckmann. Now, when it comes to Chris Stuckmann, I grew up with Chris Stuckmann, figuratively and literally. From my early 20s into my early 30s, we were very, very good friends. We've made countless videos together, flip trip videos, hilariosity videos. He stayed at my house. I slept on his parents' floor multiple times when he lived at home.
Hey man, Darwin, I Ching, shit happens, whatever man, we gotta roll with it.
Epic double drop! And even though life, changes and evolves and people sort of change and go different directions, I was happy to see that he got to make a feature-length film because I know that was always his goal when starting YouTube. Yeah, he wanted to review movies and do the film criticism thing, but ultimately his goal was to be a filmmaker. And I respect that. Why? Because, well, he sort of achieved it, and you got to appreciate shit like that. So after years of consistency and pumping out the videos, he got to make a movie. And I think the path that he found to make the movie was definitely unique to creating content on the internet. And what I mean by that is because of his fan base and his following and his YouTube career, he was able to use that to catapult his first debut film as a film director. So I know this thing has been in development for a very long time. And like I previously mentioned, throughout the years, Stuckmann and I would hang out all the time. And there are some ideas I saw in his new movie, Shelby Oaks, that I saw come to fruition up on the big screen that I remember him talking about, or sort of reading through the pages of some of his earlier scripts from even 10 years ago that I saw in this movie. For example, there's some evil, demented animals that you might see here and there. And I remember that was an idea he had many, many years ago. And I remember he used to stay at my house and I would wake up in the afternoon and you would go to my guest room and he was in there sitting Indian style on the bed on his laptop, typing up notes for a script or coming up with ideas. So the dude has been dedicated for a very, very long time. I think it's pretty awesome that Neon picked this movie up. And I will say this from a marketing standpoint, I think Neon is doing this film every favor they possibly can when it comes to the marketing material, the posters. I think they did a really good job with the trailer for this film and really getting people excited to watch it. And I think the marketing for this film has been pretty top notch. I think he almost got lucky with the marketing style that Neon has done for this film. I'm blown away by it. I mean, it's sort of surreal to walk into a Regal theater and see a poster of a movie that was made by a dude that used to sleep on your couch. It's just kind of a weird feeling, but sort of interesting, right? And I think it's kind of cool. So, all right, so let's talk about Shelby Oaks. The main actress is Camille Sullivan, who plays Mia, and she's searching for her long-lost sister, Riley, who would make content on the early days of YouTube back in 2010, 2012. And she would lead a group called the Paranormal Paranoids. And they would essentially make ghost hunting videos and found footage type videos. And I liked that aspect of the story. And that's sort of the way the movie opens up. The first 20 minutes of Shelby Oaks, I think, may have been my favorite part of the film. And hear me out for a second, because there's a lot of back and forth clips of showing you screen recordings of what old YouTube used to look like and found footage clips from the Paranormal Paranoids and really setting up the premise of the film. And I think if the whole movie was almost structured in that way, where you have screen captures of like old YouTube videos and screen recordings of what old YouTube used to look like from 2010, which was very nostalgic to see. And then you cut with found footage. I think maybe more of that throughout the film would have been beneficial to it. But after those first 20 minutes, you get the title shot of the movie, Shelby Oaks. And from there, it turns into like a standard film with a little bit of found footage throughout. And I thought the lead actress, Camille Sullivan, who plays the character Mia, the older sister, who is the main actress in the film, I think she was one of the best things about the film. I think she gave like the standout performance. And knowing Chris, I could tell sort of what he was going for with her, or at least I would assume so. He was sort of going for like a Toni Collette from Hereditary meets a Naomi Watts from The Ring. That was sort of the vibe I was getting from her character. The other thing I want to talk about when it comes to the movie are some of the influences and comparisons I have to make when it comes to Shelby Oaks. Like I just mentioned, the lead actress in this film definitely gave me strong lead actress vibes from Hereditary and The Ring, meets probably the Blair Witch from 2016. I would say you combine all three of those things, and that's sort of the vibe and tone of Shelby Oaks that I was picking up. And, you know, those are all movies I know Stuckmann loves. And there are also some very strong influences. If you've watched his videos, you probably will hear him say this a million times over. If you've just watched his video on Signs, the dude loves M. Night Shyamalan. And you can definitely see that M. Night Shyamalan influence at times. The very long take static shots where the camera's not moving and you're just sort of glued looking at this one POV for an extended amount of time where it's almost uncomfortable. I thought a few scenes throughout the movie really worked with that. Some of the other things I really enjoyed, like I mentioned, the first act, I think builds up that tension and it builds up the question, like what happened to this girl when she was ghost hunting? Where is she? What happened? And I think that main hook was like the best thing about the movie. When it comes to Neon picking this movie up, I know they increased the budget. It went from like $1.4 million to like 2.8, or at least that's what Wikipedia says. I'm not an accountant. I'm not quite sure. But I know for a fact they did some reshoots with the movie, and there are some practical effects. So once this movie, after the first 20 minutes, sort of dives into your standard horror film, I do think there are some like there's some fun to be had. There's a very shocking moment in the first 20 minutes of the movie where it sort of catapults the story to go. And from there are some sequences that I thought were very well done. And I can tell Stuckmann put a lot of thought into these. For example, there's a scene where the main character is watching a mini DV tape that connects to her sister, and she is glued to the TV that she's watching it on. And during that sequence that feels like it lasts 5 minutes, the camera slowly pans into the screen. And it reminded me of a scene from another movie called The Ring, where a very similar scene does in fact happen, almost identical. And that's one of my sort of takeaways from this, is there's a lot of things that feel a bit derivative from a handful of other movies. And listen, I know pretty much everything that has been done already exists. Like anything that you can do already exists somewhere, somehow in another movie, especially in the horror genre for the most part. But I think that scene was very well done. Another sequence that stood out to me in this was there is one scene where the character goes to a prison, and that was shot at the Mansfield Reformatory, where they shot Shawshank Redemption. And with all that said, my name is Morgan Freeman. Have you seen Shelby Oaks? And I thought that was one of the coolest sequences in the film. Now, that's a place I've been, and I know it's a place Stuckmann's been many times, and he's even said he's wanted to shoot movies or scenes there. And I think that was visually, aesthetically, and as far as the atmosphere goes, I think that entire sequence at the Mansfield Reformatory, where the mystery takes this lead character, I think was one of the highlights of the movie. There are some cool shots. You might have seen the one shot in the trailer where the camera's sort of like following after the lead actress running down one of the catwalks in the prison. But I will say, in that sequence, when watching the movie, there is one scene where the lead actress is in a prison cell and you just hear a whoosh, and it's just a sound effect, and she flies out of the cell and runs away, and you're like, what happened there? Was it just a sound effect that did that, or was it something else? So maybe there was a budget constraint issue with that. Maybe they couldn't put what they wanted to in that scene, so they replaced it with just a whoosh sound effect to scare the lead actress and run away. But that's one small, nitpick, and I'm sure that was probably a budget issue. They just couldn't maybe afford the VFX that they really wanted for that sequence. And I have talked to Stuckmann over the last couple of years, and I do remember a conversation from, maybe a year and a half ago, where he did say there were a few VFX issues that just due to budget and time, they couldn't quite get right. And I know for a fact one of those sequences is towards the end of the movie. And when watching it, I definitely think the influx of money from Neon helped polish that ending scene a little bit. But we'll get to the ending. Without any spoilers, we'll get there. As far as some of the negatives I have with the movie go, I think the cohesiveness of the mystery and going from point A to point B to point C feels a bit clunky. And as far as like the logistics of it go, it feels a bit questionable. But where the lead actress needs to go is conveniently like a football throw away. It's like all of these locations just somehow coincidentally are in the same like 1 mile radius of each other. And you ask yourself, well, if you've been looking for your sister for a decade, how have you not unraveled this mystery a bit sooner? But as far as some of the narrative and some of the story and some of the connections go, what drove that character to go from one place to another, I felt was just maybe somewhat flimsy. And when you get into the third act of the movie, I think this might be where my biggest issue is. It really, you have this mystery and you have this journey. And when it comes to mini movies, sometimes the destination isn't quite as rewarding as you hoped it would be. And for me, there's movies that exist like Hereditary, right? You have a great movie, very well made, the first 2 acts very well crafted, but when you get to that conclusion, it's like, well, because. And I could tell what he was going for with this. He wanted something that was visceral and a little bit fucked up and a little bit dark and edgy. And I think there were highlights of that in there. But as far as the execution goes, I don't know if it quite stuck the landing. I don't think the ending of this movie really worked for me. And I think maybe had it just been a little bit more ambiguous, maybe that would have been the right ending to this movie. But I definitely... I can appreciate the direction he was going for with it, but I don't know if the ending really stuck that landing it was looking for. That's really my main criticism with it. I think the ending of the film, had it been tweaked or twisted or just maybe you didn't get everything, I almost think that would have been a better ending. As far as like the direction of the movie goes and getting the most out of your performers, I think Stuckmann pretty much did what he could with this movie. I do. And here's my main, constructive criticism. Chris should maybe for his next film direct something someone else has written and step away from writing just for his next film. I think he should focus on just directing it and getting the most out of the performances and showcasing what he can do with a camera and the cinematography and telling the story visually, and step away from actually writing the story. Because for me, when it comes to Shelby Oaks, I don't think it necessarily felt that original at times. And I definitely, as a dude who makes YouTube videos, really appreciated the first 20 minutes of that YouTube vibe of it. But I really feel like the detriment of this movie with the premise and the story was he tried to do more than he necessarily needed to for the story, especially with some of the visuals. And I understand budget limitations. I understand that completely. You're talking to a guy who uses party poppers as special effects during live streams. But I really feel like sometimes less would have been more throughout the film, So those are my overall thoughts on Shelby Oaks. If you guys have seen the movie, what did you think about it? I'm curious to know. And if you haven't, the movie does come out. I believe it comes out this Friday. So look out for that at limited theaters. If you want my final flicking grade on Shelby Oaks, I'd give it a C. I'll insert a big C graphic right there. I give it a C for Chris Stuckmann. And if you like that, you can click right here and get Stuckmannized. Which should have been the tagline under the poster. Just putting it out there. Right under the title, Shelby Oaks. It should have been, watch this movie if you want to get Stuckmannized.